link shown here. In effect, the recipe that I'm covering in this lecture will not work, and I'm just keeping it in the course so that you're aware of this feature, and at a later point when this issue will be addressed, I will update this lecture. I encourage you to read through the details of this issue available at this link. You will find that the issue is expected to be fixed in version 2.2.0. At this point, you may skip this lecture or you may continue with it and gain some more understanding of how the peer dev mode works. Please keep in mind that the recipe steps shown in this lecture will not work. There are two peer launch modes. The default mode is the net mode. In the net mode, when the chain code is instantiated, the peer launches the chain code container. The second mode is the dev mode. In the dev mode, the peer does not automatically launch the chain code container. The developer has to launch the chain code as a standalone process. The dev mode is used for debugging, and to launch the peer in dev mode, the --peer chain code dev flag needs to be set to true. In this recipe, you will learn how to launch the peer in dev mode and use it for debugging purposes. There are 4 steps in this walkthrough. In step number 1, we launch the peer in the dev mode by using the flag --peer chain code dev equal to true. Step 2 will build and launch the Go chain code. Step number 3 will install and instantiate the chain code, and in step number 4 we'll execute chain code query and invoke to test the setup. Before I start with the walkthrough, let's take a quick look at the example chain code that I'm going to use in this walkthrough. You will find that there are these format.println statements that print out the action that the chain code is executing. For example, here when the invoke is executed, it prints out invoke. Similarly, when the query is executed, it prints out query response. Please go through this code on your own to see what it is doing and how it is printing out these messages. You will find that these messages get printed out on the terminal for the chain code process. So as part of the testing, we'll look for these messages. For this walkthrough, I have already initialized the order and the peer. I will be using the startdev.sh for launching the peer in dev mode. And here is the launch command and the flag --peer chain code dev set to true. So let's go ahead and launch the peer. Startdev.sh and our peer has launched. As part of step 2, we need to carry out 2 actions. The first one is to build the chain code, and to build the Golang chain code example O2, we will use the command go install. Once this command is executed successfully, the binary for the chain code example O2 will be generated under the subfolder bin under GoPath. The next thing we need to do is launch this chain code. But before we can launch this chain code, we have to set up the environment variables. And these environment variables are, first one is chain code ID name. Here we have to specify the name of the chain code and the version of the chain code in the format name : version. So in our case, we are using GoCCDev as the name. Next environment variable is the logging level. Since we are debugging, it is suggested that you set the logging level to debug. And then we have to provide the peer address, which is localhost : 7052. To launch, simply execute the chain code binary, which is available under the bin subfolder. Let's go ahead and execute step number 2. We'll first open a new terminal and set up the environment. Next, we're going to execute the go install command to build the binary for the chain code. Once this command has executed successfully, the bin subfolder will be created under the Go path, and under that, we will also have the binary for the chain code. As a next step, we will set the environment variables. I'll just copy and paste these environment variables from the README file. The name of the chain code, as I indicated earlier, is GoCCDev, and the version is 1.0. Next, we're going to launch the chain code as a standalone process. So at this point, our chain code process has started. Let's go to the terminal for the peer, and here you would observe that we have some messages indicating that GoCCDev 1.0 is ready. In step number 3, we will install and instantiate the chain code. Please note that the install step may not be needed in future as per the Fabric documentation. In step number 4, we will execute the chain code query and invoke command to test the setup. In the next steps, we'll need to open a forced terminal, set the environment, and then execute the install command. Our install command has executed. Let's instantiate, copy the instantiate command from readme and execute. At this time, our chain code is instantiated. Next, let's run the query and see if we get a response from our chain code. So we did get a successful response. If we go back to the chain code, you can see there was a query response. Next, I'll execute the invoke command just to test it out. Clear the screen, clear chain code invoke, and if we go back to our chain code, we'll see some more messages here that indicate that the chain code was invoked. So, as you are debugging your chain code, you can easily put print statements in your chain code that you can see on the console for your chain code process. In this recipe, you learn how you can launch the peer in dev mode and carry out debugging for your chain code. To launch the peer in dev mode, use the flag --peer -chain code dev equal to true. When you will launch the peer in dev mode, you will need to execute the chain code on the terminal, as the peer will not launch the chain code in Docker container.